What's up everybody, it's Rafi from ZURB and I got part 3 of our series on Panini today, and it's all about front matter and variables. Last week we talked about layouts, pages, and partials, so if you missed that, go back and watch that one first, then come back here. So front matter is the brains of Panini, and this is really where you can control what happens on your page right at the top of the page. So you can set variables, you can define layouts, and there's other helpers as well that you can use inside of your pages or your partials to really make reusable components more reusable. So I'm going to show you how that works. There's a lot of amazing stuff. Let's take a look. Alright, so let's get started with some front matter and variables. Now the idea here is to create some components that are really reusable. And I mean super reusable. So let's jump into what that would look like. So first thing we'd like to do is hop over to our page. So we're going to jump into the index page, which is the home page of our website. And we're going to set up some front matter. Now front matter is the brains of your pages. And it's really what defines what happens on each page. So front matter is created with 3 dashes at the top and then 3 dashes at the bottom. Now in here we can use some predefined variables that comes with Panini. So one of those predefined variables is the layout. So this layout variable allows you to choose one of the layouts that are in your layout file. So if you had multiple layouts, let's say you have a microsite with some different styles, maybe a different Google Analytics code, maybe completely different structure, you might create a separate layout. You can define that in here. And maybe you would name it something a little bit more specific than this, but you can name it anything you want, and then as long as the name of this key value pair matches, it's going to pull in that, or this page is going to use that layout. So this syntax is called YAML, and that's YAML, or .yml is the file extension for any type of YAML file. And this is basically a type of markup language. And you could do a lot of things with YAML. You can even create data in YAML in front matter. But we're going to call this front matter just to keep it consistent, and then the language that it's written in is YAML. So layout is one of the predefined variables. Now since we're using the default layout, we actually don't need to define that. Now you could just to be verbose, but you don't need to if you are using the default layout, so just leaving it out will automatically go to the default layout. Another predefined variable that we might use is page. Now, page is not something that you'll probably use in front matter too much, maybe you will, but definitely helpful in the layout. So let's jump over to our layout and see where we might use that. So there is a title tag in the head of your layout. Now this is a great place to set up something that repeats across every page, in particularly the page name. So it's very common to set the page name for each page because it's good for search engine optimization, SEO. So we might do something like this where we have the name of our company or our brand, and then in front of that, we would have the specific name of the page. So in this case, if we were on the building block page that I'm showing over here, it would actually inject the words building block instead of this page variable. And what it does is it removes the .html and it just takes the name. Now, if that's something that you want to do, you could definitely do that. If you want to have a little bit more control, because as you notice, some of these pages, they have dashes or underlines connecting the words, and that's something that you need to have but may not look as good in the meta title. We might actually set up a variable like a custom variable. Custom variable called meta title. I'm just making this word up. You can choose anything you want as long as you're not reusing it or an already existing or a variable that you already created. So we're going to create one called meta title. And you can create any kind of variables you want and use them. So now I'm going to create this meta title variable over here, and I'm going to set this up for my home page. All right. So the meta title for this home page, I'm going to call it building blocks because that is the website that I'm building. And so now it's going to inject the words building blocks at the top of this page in the meta title. So that's already one optimization down, and now we can move on to the rest. So in particular, I want to show you how to make a reusable component really reusable. So we have a hero here that we're using on our website. And we really want this to be a reusable component. So right now it has real information in it, real data. So we have a date, we have a title, and we have a class for that sets the background image, and we have a call to action for the button. So if we hop over to our example, this is what it looks like. So you see, if we want to reuse this component over and over again across multiple pages, we would actually need to set this up a different way. Now, traditionally, what would happen is you would have this header be on every single page. So it would be at the top of the page here, and then we would have to change the information. And then we have our other pages, and it would sit at the top of the pages. Now, this is undesirable because if we want to change the background image for every page, we're going to have to go in and manually change the class that's added to the top. We're going to have to manually change all this text every time in the code itself. And that's going to slow us down and open us up to more errors. So we're not going to do that. We're going to make this a very reusable component. So let's get rid of that from our pages. And if we jump into our layout, you could see that we have this hero as a partial. Now, right now, this hero is in our layout, so that means it's going to be added to every single page of the website, unless we specify otherwise. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. But right now, we're going to act as if it's going to be on every single page, and that way we need to create some front matter that will help us decide what goes into each hero unit and make this really a template rather than a piece of code that we're just copying and pasting on every page and then changing. So I'm going to go ahead and split this code editor into two columns so we could see a little bit better of what's going on here. So I'm going to start with my index page, and now I'm going to set up these other front matter variables that are going to affect our hero unit. Okay, so first off, we're going to grab the post date. So let's remove this and replace it with a variable. Now again, a variable is two handlebar curly brackets, and it does not need a greater than sign because it's not a partial, and then we just need to name it. So let's just call this post date. So if we save that, now we're going to go over here and type in post date colon, let's spell that correctly, post date colon, and then paste the date in there, and we'll save that. Now we can move on to the title. So we're going to remove that and replace it with our variable, which we'll call title. All right, and then we'll paste our title in the front matter of that page. Next, we're going to do the same thing with our subtitle. So you might have guessed it that this is going to be a variable called subtitle. And then over here, we'll call this subtitle, colon, and then paste in the text. And we can even do this with the call to action on the button. Let's say we want that to change on every page. So we can call this, let's call it CTA, shorthand for call to action, and we'll paste in the text there. So if we hop back over to our example, we can see that all of this is still in the page, and now we are using variables to basically inject this data from the front matter into these locations, into these variables. And so now if I change this, let's say it's an e-commerce site, and we want to say buy now, exclamation point. We can make that change, and let's make sure that we actually save on this side. There we go. So now the button says buy now. So the cool thing is, I just need to set up this front matter on my other pages, and now I can define what happens inside that hero unit on every single page. So now I'm going to go over to my other page. I'm going to paste this in, and now I'm going to say, call this something else. So let's call this so we'll name this page a little bit differently. We can even change the post date. We can change the title. Now, the cool thing is the title is already in the hero unit. We can actually reuse this variable in multiple places if we want to. So another thing we could do is let's reuse this meta title down here. So we actually can type less. Okay, so if we know that the meta title is going to also be the title of the page, or maybe some content in the body of the page, we can reuse a variable in multiple places. And that's really the idea of it. All right, so now if we hop over to our other page, building-block, you can see that those changes that we made have affected the page. So this title now is pulling the meta title, and we can change other things on this. So let's change this to something else. We can make this long description here be the subtitle. So let's go ahead and change that and see that this title has changed. And now we can even change the CTA of the button. So we'll save that, and now the button changed to download. So another really cool thing that you might do is, since this is a very reusable component, we might want the background to change depending on what page we're on. So we could definitely do that back here. So we're using this class hero-building-blocks to change the background image, or to set the background image. So let's actually create a variable here inside of the class. So you can actually use these handlebar variables inside of a class. So we'll call this hero class. So now we have our variable set there. Let's set it up here in the front matter of this page. So we can set it to be hero building blocks. So now this class that we just set up in the front matter will be injected here when we're on the building blocks page. So if we hop back over, you can see that that totally works. Now, to show you the difference, let's set up a hero class. And we're actually not going to assign anything to it. We're going to leave it blank. And if I do that and save, now I can hop over to my example, and you can see that the background image is gone, and now it's just using the fallback background color that we've set. So some really cool stuff that you can do with the variables inside of the classes. So that's a kind of really nice thing to set up. So now we can change the background image based on what page we're on really easily, or even the background color. And really you can use this setup in any of your classes if you want certain pages to have certain classes or certain components to have certain classes depending on the page that they're on. You could set this up in frontmatter to do that. So the hero class is being set as the background image that we were using in our building block, and then on the index page we didn't set one, so it's going to not inject that class there. So that's pretty neat stuff. Now we're going to take a look at how you can use frontmatter for actual data or some kind of logic. So one thing I mentioned before is that we might not want the hero unit on every single page. And in fact, if we hop back over to our page example, there's also this filter navigation which is yet to be completed, but that is something that we might want to only have on certain pages. In fact, it really only belongs on the home page and maybe a couple others. So we're going to set that up now and use frontmatter to control that. So let's take a look and how we would do that. So if we go into the default layout, and I'm going to move back to a single view. So this hero unit is something that we want to set up, as well as the filter nav. So let's go ahead and use some Panini handlebar helpers to do this. So we're going to set up a helper that is using a variable called hero. So we're basically wrapping this hero unit in an if helper. So that looks like two curly brackets, the hash sign or hashtag, and the word if. Then you name the variable that you're creating. Here, we're calling it hero. And then you need to close that around the item that you want it to affect with a slash and then if. So what this does, and we're going to do it again over here, what this does is allows us to decide if this page or this component is going to be shown on a specific page. And we're going to control that in our frontmatter. So now we've set this if statement up around both the hero and the filter navigation. I'm going to save that. And now we're going to hop over to our index page. So we can use frontmatter to decide how this is going to show up. So if we look at the names of these, one of them is called hero, and this one needs to be called filter nav because we want it to be different than hero. So now we have two variables that we could add to the frontmatter of the index page. So let's call this filter nav so it matches, and we're going to set this to true. And we're also going to make one for hero and set that to true. So you can see that that totally works because we want the hero and the filter nav to be on the index page, which we're on right now. So we're going to hop over to our building block page, which Now we're going to exclude these components from that page. So let's set this to false and false. And we'll hop over to our building blocks page. And you can see that now the hero and the subnav are not showing up. So that's how you can use Panini's helpers along with frontmatter and variables to choose what shows on a page and what doesn't show on a page. Now you can even write data in your frontmatter that you can use in your component. Now of course we can write data in the actual data folder, which we're going to go into more next week, and we're also going to go into those handlebar helpers like the if helper that I just showed you in a later lesson. But for now you can know that you can also write data into the frontmatter. So lastly, I want to show you how to use the root helper. So the root variable helper is one that is included with Panini, and it is something that's really useful. It's not something that you use in frontmatter though. It's something that you use for images and page paths. So you basically use it for file paths. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at how that might be set up. So if we jump into our hero, we have this anchor tag here. So if I want to link up this anchor tag to another page, I'll start with the root helper. So the root helper or variable is just the word root inside of the handlebars, and then we'll just need to create the page location. So what this does is it makes sure that you're always starting at the root of the directory. So that's here at the source folder. So whatever your URL will be, your subdomain, your domain will be your domain name / building blocks, and then the path that we put in here. So the root helper just makes sure that you get to the end of building blocks, which is the name of this site in this case. So if we wanted to jump over to the building blocks page, we can definitely do that and just point it to there. Using the root helper, we'll just make sure that we are at the root of the directory. We don't have to type out the whole URL. This is for creating relative paths. And then if we were to use this for an image, it would be very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and create an image. And now I'm going to show you how to set it up with the source. So again, we're going to use the root helper. And now we're going to point to the assets folder. So there's an image folder inside of the assets folder, and then we just need to choose the name of our image. So we have an icons folder, and then inside the icons folder we can choose one of these. So that's how you set up an image path using the root helper. It will make sure that when you're working with relative paths that you are always at the root directory, so your assets always work. Also, when you are deploying from the dist folder, it will make sure that the proper domain and subdomain are imported right here. All right, so that's some really cool stuff, and I'm super excited that pretty soon you're going to be an expert on handlebars, templating, and Panini. So next week we're going to talk about JS helpers and data, so we're really taking it up a notch. I don't want you to miss the next one, so make sure you hit subscribe, that way the Yeti could get a bath for his matted hair. And also, we are teaching this in our Advanced Foundation class, so make sure that you check that out. I'll put the link down below. And until next week, have a great one.